What's the most awkward situation you've ever been in with a stranger? Worked at a hotel front desk third shift and an old, maybe 75 plus lady called the front desk and wanted a pillow delivered to her room. I took the pillow. When I got there she wanted me to come inside. I'm like, "Oh no, here is your pillow." She insisted, so I did. I get inside, she shuts the door and tells me to put the pillow on the bed. She then goes to a drawer in her dresser. At this time I'm like, I need to return to the front desk, thinking the worst. She then pulls out a thing of band-aids and wants me to put band-aids on her open sores on her feet. I noped on out of there as fast as I could and left before she came down for morning breakfast. Still freaks me out. Yuck. When I was 11, me and my brother went on a trip to London and spent a little time there with our parents. At that time they used to work there. So, I live in Romania and I used to never leave the house back then, so visiting London was like a big thing for me. Everything was so new and interesting, but at the same time intimidating considering I was very shy and in a foreign country. Anyway, our parents take us to Madame Tussauds Museum. If you don't know, it's a wax museum with celebrities, superheroes and other more, and I was baffled. The sculptures were very realistic and cool, and the whole tour I was amazed. So we finished checking out the first room, and right before entering a hallway leading to the next one there were another 2 sculptures of TV hosts or something similar. I was very intrigued by those because they looked more realistic than everything else before, and one of the hosts was smiling wide with an open mouth and I was fascinated by his teeth for whatever reason. So I knew I wasn't allowed to touch anything, but I slowly moved my finger to his teeth and right before I almost touched them, boom, he says hello to me. It literally scared the shit out of the 11-year-old awkward shy kid I was back then. It turns out they were real people who prank innocents. After the scare I felt so awkward. Probably the most awkward ever until that date. Is not really that big of a thing, but I really wanted to share. I serve in the Air Force and one time I got injured at work and had to go to the hospital. Nothing serious. Just dinged my finger super hard. Fucked up the ligament. My finger was shaped like an N. In a hoe. When I get to the hospital I walk in the front door. I'm still in uniform. And some nice older man comes up to me and thanks me for my service. I told him I appreciated his support and then he abruptly asked me if I was married. I told him no, and right at that moment he turns to this woman walking by heading for the door. He turns to her and says something along the lines of, "You see this nice man? You should go on a date with him." At first I thought maybe he knew the woman. Maybe his daughter or something, but the shocked look on her face, I could easily tell he did not know her. She stopped for a moment and he asked her again and she just went wide-eyed. Kind of stuttered for a moment and then beelined it for the door. I really didn't know what to say, so I just stood there looking like a guy who just got whacked in the head. The old man then turns back to me and says, "Let's see who else is here and available." At this point I just made some excuse about being late for my appointment and walked away. I don't know if I've ever been so red before or again in my life. Every elevator ride. For me, it's getting an Uber by myself. Do I sit in the front or the back? Which is more awkward? I have no idea. But I do know it's uncomfortable as hell. Drove for Uber for 5 years. Here's some guidelines that experienced drivers tend to follow. When taking an Uber lift by yourself. Front passenger side seat, you want to chat and have conversation. Rear passenger side seat, neutral zone. Driver will gauge how much you want to talk and act according to their mood. Rear driver side seat, you do not want to chat and have conversation. Rear middle seat, you're a monster. Discovered, whilst at the top of St. Paul's Cathedral, that I am terrified of heights. A Norwegian woman was having the same experience. We were so unnerved we ended up holding one another and bumping down the spiral staircase on our backsides. Parted ways at the bottom without a word or a backward glance. It was Christmas Day 2012. My dad has passed away the night before. I was flying to the city he lived in to make arrangements. My flight was mostly empty. However, there was a new mom on board. She was carrying her infant daughter. A soft-sided dog carrier. Plus diaper bag. Plus a purse. No stroller in sight. We land and I make my way to the bathroom. As I'm washing my hands, the new mom enters. She's flustered and exhausted. I look at her and say, "Can I help you? I'm a mom myself. My son is actually 5 weeks old." Without warning, she thrusts her infant to me, turns around and promptly drops her pants with the restroom door open and goes to the bathroom. I quickly averted my eyes and entertained the infant. When she was done, I asked if she needed help to baggage claim. Turns out her husband was waiting for her outside. Edited for clarification. The husband was waiting outside the restroom door prior to baggage claim. The lady and I exited together and she walked up to him, still carrying everything, and they walked away together. He did take the dog and collected luggage when we got to baggage claim. Wife and I went to Europe for our honeymoon. We were in a train station in Amsterdam and I had to use the bathroom. I walked into the toilet stall and saw there was TP in the bowl but didn't think anything of it. I did my business, and when I tried to flush, it didn't go down. In a panic I flushed again, and this only resulted in the water becoming dangerously close to the rim of the bowl. I said FCK it and started to leave. However, right outside the stall was a bathroom attendant. He looked over at me and started yelling at me, asking why was I clogging up the toilet. He was blocking me from leaving, and all these other people in the bathroom looked in at us. God, it was so embarrassing, I wanted to die. I eventually muttered sorry and brushed past him and ran out of the bathroom. I used to do security work at parties. One night there was an alert call for a young woman gone missing. I found her with her dress hitched up looking for her underwear in the bushes. I managed to unlock her phone to call her dad, who from his name I recognized as the district attorney. He comes over to pick up his intoxicated daughter. While I was carrying her to the car, she was making very sexual remarks about me carrying her. All the while her father is hearing me out like I was responsible for his daughter ending up that way, even suggesting I had raped her. His lecture continued after I put his daughter in the back seat, still making the same remarks while pressing up her body against the car window. When the cops arrived at the scene, she was stark naked, putting her ass out the window. I told the cops my side of the story. As soon as she picked up my name, she started moaning it to the point of waking up nearby neighbors. I was brought to the police station for interrogation. Surveillance footage proved my innocence. 5 years later I see this district attorney on a weekly basis at my job. I was with my mum buying flowers at a florist for a New Year's Eve party. The florist was obviously a very lonely woman and wouldn't stop going on about how she isn't doing anything for New Year's and how it's so nice we have friends to visit, to the point where it became really saddening. My mother obviously really felt for her. Every now and again, maybe twice a year, she has a brain fart and accidentally says what she is thinking. That day was one of those rare days. After paying for the flowers, my mum said thanks. Hope you find a friend soon. I look at her in shock. The woman looks at her in shock. And my mum just gasps, apologizes and literally backs out of the store. God, it was so awkward. At a movie theater, I went alone and so did the guy sitting next to me, and the couple sitting next to us was having a pretty heavy makeout session. I was at a movie theater with my brother. We were watching Pacific Rim. During the action scenes he had to fart like a moth so he waited until the music was at its loudest to be inconspicuous. The second he lifts his butt cheek and begins, the music stops and all everyone can hear in the movie theater is giant foghorn of a fart. Imagine the music and action scenes. How it builds and builds and builds, then has a moment of silence for a bit more drama. Then a f-king shot sounding fart takes it over. The reactions from the people in the theater were laughter, WTF, S, and wow really yes. We were laughing so bad we were crying. Anyway, just wanted to share lol. Edit. Just seeing all your comments and that this made everyone cry with laughter made me so happy. Thank you everyone. I tried to make some moves on a girl when I was in high school. We were in a 7/11 near the back. And because of the late hour, I figured we were alone. When she turned me down and left, I decided to drown my sorrows with a bag of Sour Patch Kids and physically ran into the older, bearded man who had been buying nuts. He gave me a sympathetic look and opened his mouth as if to say something. And I panicked. I said, "See you tomorrow," and left the store. I still think about this nightly. It was intensely awkward when I gave a hitchhiker a ride and he started talking graphically about his sexual interests and proclivities. I only gave him a ride because it was pouring rain and he looked like a college student from our university. When he started getting more and more personal, I couldn't wait for him to get out of the car at his destination, something he didn't want to do once we arrived. I wonder what the mindset there was. Oh hey, this anonymous stranger looks kinky. I'll hitchhike with them and woo them with my creepy sexy talk. Double quote. I worked at Old Navy and some lady was looking at men's shirts and she stopped me and held up this shirt and asked if I thought it would fit her son. I looked around and no one else was around. We stood in silence for maybe 30 seconds before she started laughing and said, "Oh. Haha. You don't know my son, he lives in Michigan. We were in Washington State. Never mind me. I'm just stoned. Haha." And then she went and bought the shirt. When I was a teenager, my friends and I would spend the weekend staying up late playing video games and eating junk food. I was also a cross-country runner. And on this particular night I was experiencing some extreme chafing from a long run earlier that day. While we were at the gas station getting Doritos and energy drinks, I announced to who I thought was my friend, "Man, my nipples really hurt." Upon realizing it was a complete stranger with whom I had just shared this intimate detail, I simply stared at him and said, "You're not my friend," and walked away. I didn't go back to that gas station for a long time. Edit. I'm a guy for those wondering. When I was young, I thought some random lady was my mum and tugged her skirt. She turned, screamed, and I screamed back. Not my proudest moment. Once I was in McDonald's parking lot with my friends waiting to get in my friend's dad's car. And I saw a car that looked identical to the one I needed to get into. So I get into it. And turns out it isn't the car I was supposed to be in. The stranger's expression of pure fear still pops into my head time to time. The same thing happened to me a few times. Once, when I was about 10, I got in the passenger side of what I thought was my dad's car. I was waiting for a few minutes and then the real owner of the car comes up and gets in the driver's seat. At first I was terrified that he was going to kidnap me and steal the car. So I start scrambling for the door handle when he starts yelling at me for being in his car. That's when I realized I was in the wrong car and booked it back to the store, where my dad was waiting and laughing hysterically. He saw me get in the wrong car and just waited to watch it play out. Hooked up with a guy in college and fell asleep in his dorm room. I woke up in the middle of the night needing to pee so f***ing badly but unable to find any of my clothes right away. I ended up spending so long trying to find them in the dark that by the time I had enough to wear out in the hall to get to the bathroom I didn't think I'd make it. He was still sleeping, so I grabbed a big reusable water bottle and squatted over it. It was blissful relief until I looked over and saw his roommate staring at me in horror. Haha, I was that roommate once. My old roommate's ex was a sleepwalker and was really bad when she was drunk. One night I hear my door open and she's walking into my room stark naked. She opens up my laundry basket and squats on it and I'm with my GF, so I'm whispering, "Amy. PSSST. WTF are you doing? Amy. PSSST," and yep. She takes a big healthy piss on all my clothes. As I'm still trying to whisper her awake without waking my GF up, she just kind of snaps out of it. The glassy eyes become focused and she goes, "Oh my god," and runs out. Next day I leave for work and I come back to all my clothes washed and folded with a case of beer in my room. My wife and I went out for a drink one night. We walk into the bar. I see someone I know at the bar with their back turned. Walk up behind them and tickled their sides. Turned out I didn't know this person. They just have me a weird look and walked away. Got their spot at the bar though. It was my first time voting in a presidential election in 2016 since becoming old enough to do so. And polling place was at a library. When I get to the front of the line and start filling out the required papers, I mention it's my first time and what to do next. After hearing this, the woman who was working there and helping me raised her voice and said, "Hey everyone. We've got a first time voter here." And started clapping so they all would clap as well. Nobody clapped. And I was just standing there really embarrassed before quietly saying, "Can I just go vote now?" At the airport, I walk up as the elevator door is closing and there is a woman inside with a stroller. I slowed down because I wasn't in a hurry and would rather catch the next one. Then I saw a little girl about 2 or 3 years playing in a flower pot thing nearby. I realized she was likely meant to be on the elevator with her mom. But the doors are closed by the time I put it together. I walk up to her and said, "Did your mommy get in the elevator?" She just shyly smiles. I sit down with her and decide to wait in place for a few minutes for the mom to realize. A minute or two later, a man walks up and says, "Excuse me, can I have child?" in a thick Russian Y accent. I was trying to decide what to ask to figure out if she was his kid, when the elevator door reopened and the woman came flying out yelling for the girl. She hops up happily and runs over to the mom. I stared at a guy with an accusing look. Then he turned and got in the elevator too. IDK, what the heck was going on there? Was he with them? Did he think I was trying to take their kid? Was he a creeper following them? So awkward. I literally sat silent through the whole weird encounter. Woman at a gas station didn't know how to put air in her tires, so I helped her because I wanted to put air in my tires and didn't want to wait all day to do it. She called her husband on speakerphone to let him know she found some nice man to help her air her tires. Then I hear him call her an idiot and say that I'm only helping her because I want to FCK her, and where does she get off talking to other men? She stammered and tried to explain that nothing was going on between us. After she got off the phone, she looked at me as if her husband just caught her F-king me and got in her car and left. No thank you. No nothing. And for some reason I felt guilty for even helping her out. Jesus, I feel awkward just thinking about it. The most awkward moment of my life thus far was with a stranger. I was in Quebec airport going through customs with my family. Because of some recent changes to their system, they didn't have everyone in a line, but instead in a large pen where they would release 50 people at a time. Chaos. When my family is at the front, they release us and everyone is running forward in a mass trying to get to the kiosks. Next to me is a tall Swedish man trying to get his family a kiosk. He is running forward and waving his arm behind him in a come on motion, clearly frantic. Well, somehow the worlds aligned where his middle and pointed finger went perfectly into my 2 nose holes. Perfectly. As he then ripped his arm upwards to motion his family forward. My nose was also ripped forward. And I immediately began bleeding everywhere. He looked at me in horror. My family looked at me in frustration as we needed to get to a kiosk. The customs agents looked at me in bewilderment. The language barriers made the situation all the more awkward. Edit. Whoa. You all really seem to love my misadventures, hahaha. If you all thought this was funny, you'd be dying at the first time I had to give a drug test for work. Real talk. Never flail your arm without looking. I worked security at an aquatic theme park and was watching Jeopardy in the employee entrance. One of the veterinarians came through and watched it with me for a bit. He said he watches it religiously and he'd passed the test for the show and was hoping to get selected. He'd heard that they like to have a diverse group of contestants. And they hadn't had a black guy for a while. So he liked his chances. A few days later, there are 2 black contestants. So when I see him leaving the next time, I say, "Hey, did you catch Jeopardy last week?" "No." "Why?" Comma. He responds, "There were 2 black guys on it." I explain. He just stares at me blankly for a few seconds and walks off. That's when I realized it was a different gentleman than I had the previous conversation with. Was adopted at birth. Learned who my birth family was in early 30s. Had met her sister but nobody else yet. Sister tells me grandpa is being taken off life support, cancer, and want to talk to me before he dies. Travel to hospital several hours away. Meet mom in hospital lobby for the first time ever. Go to grandpa's room where all of his and my family are. They are all there to say their goodbyes. Probably only 5% of them knew of my existence. Suddenly all the attention is on me. The stranger. They have me kneel by his side and he apologizes through tears for pressuring my mom, that I just met, to give me away for adoption. People looked pretty shocked, including me. The experience was 1,000 emotions and awkward was in there somewhere. Like probably many stories on this sub, this happened at a huddle house. My GF, now wife, and I were eating with some friends and I decided I needed to go to the bathroom. Got up, walked over to it and tried the door. It was open, so I walked right on in. The room was pretty big. Urinal and sink on one side. Toilet on the opposite side. There was a guy in there at the urinal and he gave me a really strange look when I walked in. So I went on over to the toilet. Had a pee and started actually processing my situation. That guy looked at me like I was really out of place. This toilet I'm using isn't in a separate stall. Not much privacy in here. Oh god, this is a single person bathroom. By this point the guy had hastily run out after finishing his business. I took care of my own affairs and had to do the walk of shame past him as I walked back to my table. I told my soul later that night, completely mortified. She thought it was hilarious. The look he gave me when I walked in is still burned in my mind. This happened in Korea as I was an exchange student back then. I have to get into exam room in 3 minutes because I guess I'm stupid enough to bring everything but pencil case. I panicked a lot if I should buy a new one but have to walk a lot and risking of being late, but then I decided to buy a new one. Halfway through my superpower walk I said fuck it, I'll just borrow from someone. Power walking back to the building again and I crashed into a girl holding a coffee. Now all over the floor. I'm like dead. What I'm supposed to do? Buy her a new one? Apologize profusely? But I can't speak their language? Exam in 1 minute. Dot. At this point we're just kinda staring at each other. And when I came back to my senses I just bowed repeatedly and leave her like that. I could feel it was so tense and awkward. Damn. I still wince if I think about it. Was at a bar bathroom in a stall doing cocaine with a friend and he started talking about the 2 hot chicks at the bar and which one he wanted and how I could have the other one. All of a sudden we hear this guy say, "Are you talking about the 2 girls at the bar?" My friend said, "Yeah. They're hot." He responded, "Well, one's my sister and the other's my girlfriend." After about 5 seconds of awkward silence I said, "Lucky guy. Wanna do some coke? And which one is your sister?" We became good friends with him thereafter. His sister drowned 6 months later while on vacation in Mexico about the time his girlfriend dumped him. He moved to Germany and I have only spoke to him via social networks since. I am a pediatric nurse. But we float, substitute, to other floors when we have more nurses than we need. So I was sent to an adult floor to work as an assistant. Since theirs had called in sick, an older male patient called out asking for help to get up to the bathroom. He stood, tried to pivot, and the newly operated on knee gave out. All 320 pounds of him came down on top of me and we laid there for almost an hour. I had closed the door for privacy, and neither he nor I could tell loud enough nor reach the call light for help. My phone was 10 feet from me on the floor after it fell out of my scrubs and rang incessantly. Finally the other assistant came to find me because she wanted to go on break and was tired of having to do all my work. The patient was fine. Since he fell on me, I was sore for a week. We were nose to nose the whole time and boy was it awkward. His breath was terrible. But he was a nice man and felt so bad. No. There was no boner. I was standing behind this guy waiting for the elevator in a hotel one time. We were down in the lobby and it was busy with lots of people coming and going. So he obviously hadn't noticed me. Elevator doors open. He gets in and turns to press the button for his floor. So he didn't see me walk past him on the other side. As soon as the doors close, obviously still under the impression that he was alone, he lets rip the most heinous fart that went on for all of about 10 seconds. Mid-fart. Out of the corner of his eye, he spots me standing just behind him. Poor guy almost jumped out of his skin. He's staring at me like he's seen a ghost. I'm staring at him with what I can only assume was a fairly horrified expression. Trying to think of something to say to make this whole situation less awkward. As luck would have it, we're both going to the same floor and he's staying in the room right across the corridor from me. So we have to endure an extra 30 seconds or so of mortified silence as we walk down the hall together. I thought about slipping a jokey note under his door, shoulder stayed away from the shrimp tacos at the buffet, but decided against it. Once I was at a dog groomer's to pick up my dog. It's fairly small, 20 lbs, and white. Usually when I take him, he's got long semi-curly hair, and when I pick him up he has short straight hair. Which is quite a change, and this is what I expect when I go to pick him up. I walk up to the counter and request my dog, and the clerk tells me he'll be out in a moment. 30 seconds later an attendant walks out to the lobby from the back door with a dog that immediately gets excited and tries to run away as soon as it rounds the corner to me. "Hey buddy," I say as I walk up and attempt to pick up my dog. But it turns around and starts recoiling back and gives me a nip as I try picking him up. An old man behind me asks, "Hey, is that your dog?" And me, thinking it's a pretty weird question, respond, "Yep." At that point he goes, "I don't think so, mister. That's my dog." And as I turn and realize this dog that looks just like mine after a grooming is 100% not my dog, my face goes completely red and the whole lobby starts laughing. To make it worse, the old couple whose dog it was stuck around just because they wanted to see what my dog actually looked like, and of course when he came out with a different haircut there was only a vague resemblance. Yikes. I worked the entrance gate for a theme park. Our season pass holders used a biometric scan of their right index finger to verify their identity. One day a little girl walks up with her family, who only spoke Spanish. Scans her pass and places her left finger on the scanner. I say, "Can you use your right finger, sweetie?" Then, her mother raises the girl's right arm to show me she doesn't actually have a right hand. Seemed to be due to a birth defect rather than a horrific accident. However, her left finger keeps getting rejected. So I call a lead over to override the old scan and redo it. He then proceeds to say the same thing to the girl, followed by her mother raising the arm again. It was definitely more awkward for me than the family. But it gets worse. About 3 months later it happened again. The same little girl. Absolutely mortifying. I was at a bar with my new phone, my brother's old phone. This random girl asks me if she could use my phone to call hers BC she lost it. She begins dialing her number and bam. Right there on the screen was her name saved in my phone. My brother's contacts transferred when I took his phone. Her eyes get real big and she looks up at me with what could only be described as confused fear. I try to ask her if she knew my brother, which she said she did but was obviously still weirded out. She deleted her number from the phone and fled so fast. My god, I felt so weird and horrible. First week at college as a freshman. Wander into the cafeteria the second or third day. Still unsure on how things work, the best place to grab food out of all the options. Spot a pizza station and wait in line. After waiting for a new pizza to come out, it's my turn. I grab a slice of pizza with the pizza slice grabber, but the scalding hot pizza slides off and lands face down on the cute girl's foot behind me. Sauce and hot cheese explode everywhere up her leg. And since it's the end of summer, she's wearing sandals. I panic, mutter "I'm so sorry" and run out of the cafeteria without eating the rest of the day and hide in my dorm room. Was walking down the stairs after a class and was in a really good mood. I was smiling at everyone because of this. When I smiled at one particular woman, who I didn't know, she smiled back and asked, "How are you?" And for some reason my dumbass brain couldn't cope with this, so I let out something like, "Thank." No one then physically ran away. Out of the building. I fear ever seeing her again and having to live with that. I was out with a couple friends in the city in the winter. I was drunk. So not as shy as I normally was, but still awkward. We turn a corner and one friend recognizes someone she knows. Before we turned the corner, I had been trying to suck back a big wad of runny snot, hoping we'd see a place we could stop so I could get some napkins to blow my nose. I couldn't take it anymore, so had just wiped it on my fingers. Anyway, the guy wants to shake hands. I didn't offer mine, but he kept his hand out seemingly pretty long. I couldn't wipe it without it seeming suspicious. And since I was awkward anyway plus drunk, for some reason I figured most of the snot was in my palm. So I gave a weak fingers only handshake. At first he looked at me like, what kind of weird bullshit handshake is this? And then I think it dawned on him that something else was not right. Then I realized that the snot was all over my fingers. And now all over his. Was trying to decide whether I wanted to eat some wings or Mexican food with my cousin for the longest. She started to get frustrated with my indecisiveness that I panic and picked the nearest wing spot. We walk in and stand at the front for a minute when I finally realized I wanted the latter and we needed to dip before the host sees us. Lo and behold, right as we're about to turn to leave, the host shows up and greets us. I'm an awkward mess, so instead of just saying we changed our minds, I slowly started inching away. Tried mumbling I'm sorry. Pulled out a quarter. Placed it on the table, then proceeded to run full force out of the restaurant while leaving my poor cousin alone to deal with the mess. One time I was in middle school and someone parked right in front of our mailbox. Now the annoying thing about that is that at my house they could have pulled either 10 feet forward or backwards and would have not been right in front of our mailbox. So me being an annoying middle schooler went out to get the mail and also walked up to the car yelling, ugh, why do people always park right in front of our mailbox when there are other perfectly good places to park? And as I was doing that I made eye contact with a man who was sitting in the car. Yeah, it turned out he was an undercover cop watching someone down the street from us. And that's the story of how I accidentally yelled at a cop.